Hey, everybody, it's Jeff here once again with the Freedom Nation podcast. Welcome to another show. And on today's show, I interview Robert Poole. Robert is a business owner, an entrepreneur, and he also works with folks to help them get themselves out of their businesses, to free them from their businesses a little bit. So I think you'll enjoy this, especially for those of you in our audience that are small business owners. And if you're feeling a little overwhelmed and you're feeling like you're kind of trapped in your business, his expertise, I think, is going to help you to understand the way out of that. So stay tuned, and we will see you guys on the other side.
All in you. Everything you're looking for, it's all in you. You gotta believe that it's all in you. Everything you're searching for, it's all in.
Hello, Freedom Nation, and welcome to the latest episode of the Freedom Nation podcast. And on today, I have Robert Poole, and we're going to learn a lot about what he does. For those of you that are in the audience that are from the world of business, that own businesses, you'll want to pay particular attention because Robert's going to teach us a little bit about how to get yourself out of that beautiful prison you've built that is a business. So, Robert, welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Jeff. It's great.
Glad to have you on. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Those fellow business sufferers who've created these beautiful things that we call businesses and then locked ourselves into them. At that point, look forward to hearing your take on it. So before we get started, why don't we, or to get started, why don't we start off with a little bit of your story? So tell us how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. I was my first job, if you call it that, was in the Army. I went to West Point and then was an Army officer for a few years. I got out, moved out here to the Phoenix, Arizona area where I still live today. And I got involved in business and started doing different types of sales jobs primarily. I did everything from corporate recruiting to commercial real estate. I was a financial consultant at one point, and so did a variety of things. And then I was working for Merrill Lynch in the late 90s, and I thought, wow, I really want to do something myself. I wanted the typical business owner idea of I want to be my own boss and not have limits on my income, all those exciting things that we get into the entrepreneur game for. And usually, as you mentioned, we build our own prison, but we don't think about that at the beginning. And so I jumped off and I started a small website design firm. This was like late 90s, so it was a pretty new thing with a business partner of mine. And we started working on that. And at the time, it was bootstrapped. We had no money and couldn't afford advertising. So the way we did it was through cold calling, which I had done previously. All my sales jobs have been cold calling. And we got real good at it, and we were building up the business. But we found one day a client asked us, hey, could we use some of your lead gen people, your cold callers? And I thought, well, I guess we can sub them out. And then another client asked us the same thing a couple months later. And then we realized, boy, there's a bigger demand for this than there is for our website design services. Because at that time, a lot of business didn't even have websites. And so we were selling the current. So we transitioned and started doing that full time. And we transitioned into a B2B appointment setting lead gen firm all through cold calling. And here we are 23 years later, doing multi-millions every year in that business. And it's been quite a ride. And unfortunately, I had a business partner and it was a great relationship. A lot of business partnerships don't end well. I think the quote divorce rate is higher than it is for
I've had my share of them, and they've most times have not ended well. So.
No, they usually don't. But I was extremely fortunate. I found the right partner. We were very complementary, completely different personalities and skill sets, and it worked well. But so in 2017, I came to work one morning and he didn't. And turned out he had a heart attack the previous night. And it really was quite a shock, as you can imagine. He was like family and we had a great relationship and everything. But so here I was all of a sudden stuck in this business with the head of it because we had broken up our roles in the business and I handled the operations, the HR, the financials, the technicals, all that kind of stuff. And he dealt with the customer service side of it. And both of us worked full time in the business and worked a lot of hours. But we always had each other. I would go on vacation, take a week off, and he'd cover for me and vice versa. But all of a sudden, there I was, and I'm doing his job and mine. I'm in charge of everything all of a sudden. And I realized, wow, I have zero freedom. I can't take a day off. I'm in the office at 4 a.m. I'm working until 8 or 9 at night.
Yeah.
It was the nightmare that we don't see coming. And I really, at that point, I had to do a lot of soul searching and figure things out. And I realized I was really not a business owner, that I was an operator.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I just was like an employee who happens to own 100% of the stock, so to speak. And so I really focused the first few years there on figuring out how do I get myself out of the business. I'm not so tied to it, so it's not reliant on me. And because I went through that process, I was able to figure out what I needed to do to get to that point. And it was life changing for me. I finally got my freedom back. And that's what I focus on these days, is helping. The company still existing, but my role has changed where I'm helping a lot of small business owners deal with the same thing I was, which is being
Mm.
tied to the day to day in that prison, as you put it, which I love, that we build for ourselves. So that's what I do these days.
Love it. Love it. Well, and I think there's so many business owners out there, and I was one. I always say the best thing that ever happened was the pandemic, because I was working 80, 90-hour work weeks, literally 7 days a week. And when the pandemic hit, and I was running 6 businesses at the time, when the pandemic hit, everything slowed down. And I realized that there was actually life outside of the walls of my business, and started to slow down a little bit because I was not going out on sales calls. We were doing Zooms, and all of a sudden it was like, boom, now I can get 7 hours worth of work done. That was what used to take me 12 to 15 hours. And I actually had a life outside of it. I think it's those events in life that we have to look at. And I knew I didn't want to ever go back to that again. once,
Yeah,
once,
well,
once I
that's
realized
exciting.
there was a life.
Yeah, it's amazing when you realize the possibilities. But
Yeah.
you're right, and I think COVID changed. Obviously, a lot of bad stuff, but I don't mean to minimize that. But a lot of good things came out of it. Like you said, that was a further change for us in our business, and even accelerated that process that I was changing. And so a lot of good things came out of it. But that's exciting that
Well, I think,
sometimes
yeah, I think that
things
people
push
looked at
you.
a lot of ways to, I think people looked at a lot of ways to make their business more efficient and everything else. And for me, I wasn't out driving around town on sales calls and client appointments. And I was focused more on just stack up the appointments and get through it. And there were days where, hey, there wasn't any appointments, so there was no reason to be in the office. And whereas the
Yeah.
days were before that. When we think about it from your perspective, when you're starting to work with somebody, the problem with most entrepreneurs is they're very independent and somewhat hard-headed. We are. How do
Mhm.
you get, first off, how do you get somebody to realize, okay, you need my help?
Well, I think I always ask them, what would happen if you left town tomorrow and you went to Tahiti, for instance,
Hmm.
for a month, and you didn't bring your phone, didn't bring your computer, and you didn't talk to your office? When you came back, would your business still be there? And more importantly, would it be thriving and growing without you?
Yeah.
Because if not, your business really isn't worth anything, and certainly not to an outsider.
Hmm.
And you're going to be chained to that, and you're going to buy yourself a job basically that you're going to be working until you die, unless you make a change. It's your
Hmm.
choice. If you want to continue to live that life, go for it. But most of us didn't get into this gig for that kind of lifestyle. So that's how I explain it to people.
Yeah. So when you're working with them, what are some of the steps as you walk them through the process?
Yeah, I've narrowed it down to 4 major areas that I found when I was making that transition myself that
Hmm.
are just critical. And the first one really starts with exactly what you're talking about, is the business owner, the entrepreneur, because we tend to be hard charging people who are not waiting around for somebody else to do it for us. A
Hmm.
lot of type A personalities. It's very hard for us to do things like delegate, take a step back. We just want to go. And so working on our overall mentality and realizing that, and training our mindset a little bit to change from, I've got to get this done, I've got to get those sales, I've got to get that appointment, I've got to optimize this process or whatever. Instead of that mentality, you need to have the mentality of, who needs to do this? Who needs to make these sales? Who do I need to bring in? What do we need to do as a bigger picture type of things? You start to think like an owner instead of thinking like a technician or an operator. And
Hmm.
so it's a shift in thinking. And so it's an understanding of what your role is. When I first started making that transition and started thinking about that, I really had difficulty. I felt almost guilty, like I should be doing something. When, if you're focusing on making the big time decisions, the big strategy level stuff, the owner level things, you're not going to be in that, you're not stuffing envelopes and sending emails and to a bunch of people and doing things
Mhm.
like that. So it's a hard transition to make mentally, but there's different strategies you can use to help make that mindset change. It happens very quickly for some it takes quite a while. I was in the middle, I think, probably. But so that's your number one step. Number two
Mhm.
is building some sort of internal team. It depends on where you start, of course. And that usually means employees, but it can be also contractors. A lot of us have contractors that we work with, but we usually use the same people once we get that relationship. So building a team, which is, in my opinion, your most important asset of your business. It's not the money in your bank. It's not your intellectual property. It's not your clients. It's the people that you have working with you.
Mhm.
Because if everything falls apart tomorrow, what you have is your people, and you can come back from that and
Mhm.
you can do new things. But of course, we're in a very difficult environment for hiring, in particular, the last few years. And it took me a while to figure that out too. I've hired people the wrong way for many years and had huge turnover in our company, and was able to figure that out so that now we have a lot of longevity. And then the other two things are just our systems and optimization, which is not automation. Automation supports systems and optimization. So people get carried away sometimes with technology, and it's cool, but doesn't mean just because it's cool that you need it. And the last thing that I found really helped us was involving the entire company, everyone in the sales and marketing process,
Yeah.
making it sales and marketing permeate the whole company. Because when I originally started, I looked at our company and people that were doing human resources or operations or the technical stuff, they had no idea about marketing or sales. And then the salespeople were the opposite. And so you had these two competing understandings of what the company was doing, and they clashed all the time. And the people in sales didn't do a good job of supporting the operations people, for instance, and vice versa. And when we started sort of getting together as a group and educating everybody on particularly sales and marketing, and teaching everybody from the receptionist, so to speak, and the IT person to the salespeople, we started having a unifying message, and it brought together the team. And
Mhm.
it was such a critical change in our company that I really teach that as a real important part of any business. So
Yeah.
it's really those four things. It's you as the entrepreneur, it's building that right team, the systems and processes in place, and then that idea of sales and marketing kind of permeating the whole company. So that's
Well, and
kind
I
of the
think,
things that I focus on.
yeah, and I think it's so good because I even remember one of the large financial firms I worked for. It was like the sales department, which was I was part of, and the marketing department never spoke. And
Mhm.
so you never really had any interaction even with the marketing department. And then not only that, you had all the different service departments and everything else. But I remember them doing, the marketing department would do some kind of a promotion and not tell us in the sales department what was going on. So you'd have a conversation with a client and it's like, well, yeah, you've got this promotion going. We do. I didn't even know that. So I think being able to integrate that throughout the company is a huge part of it, because then it's not, oh, well, those sales guys that make all the money, they don't really care about what we do. And I think if you're also got your sales guys realizing what the service departments and the customer service and client service are doing, it helps everybody to understand everybody's job.
Yeah, and I think it also helps with the other part of the team building, because I always look at it like we need to, as small business in particular, larger businesses is a different dynamic, but for us, when we're building a team, we really want to create a bunch of mini owners, people that feel that ownership, even if don't own equity, they feel like they're part of it. And the dedication and everything else that comes with that, and teaching and getting everybody on the same page, so to speak, particularly with sales and marketing, is
Mm-hmm.
huge for that. So you don't have what you're talking about, that tension where everybody's not on the same page. And so if we can get that right, boy, it makes a huge difference. I know it did for our company.
Yeah, and I know that. You get started with them, you're working with them. Typically, what's a typical interaction look like for working with a client? Is it a short period of time? Is it a longer period?
Yeah, it really depends on the where the client is in their business. I've got a 90-day program that I work with a client like once a week for 90 days, and we're able to accomplish a lot in that period of time. And for most businesses, that gets them far enough along the track that they can take it over from there. I do have longer relationships that I work with, but because that's a very valid question, and something everybody always asks is, how long does this take? Is this going to take years? And I always like to say it's a little bit like, the difference between an ocean liner and a speedboat, which is harder to turn. And which if you've got a large company with 100 employees, well, I mean, that's relative large for most small businesses. It's a little bit different. It's going to take a little bit longer than if it's just you and one employee. But I've found that most business owners can make that switch within a year, which sounds fast, and it could certainly be faster depending on where you are. But a lot of it is what you were talking about at the very beginning when we were talking about the business owner themselves and the resistance that we have because we want to do it our way. The faster we can let go of that, the quicker the process works. So it's a typical lawyer answer of it depends, but that's the reality of it.
Ideally, 90 days or so, you can get them far enough along the pay. Hopefully they don't fall back off the wagon again once they get there. I know in the exit planning side of my business. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Once you get that momentum going, I think it gets you a long way there.
Yeah. It's funny in the exit planning side of my business. I mean, it really goes one of two ways. Either that we make a plan. We're like, okay, so we got a 5-year exit plan. Here's where we go. I'm showing you the outside world, showing you how to, readjust your business a little bit so that you can fire yourself. And they either go one of two ways, one kicking and screaming and they don't want to make a change, or all of a sudden they accelerate from 5 years to like a year of how can I get out of this business now in a year? But yeah, it's fun to watch how they can change just by having those discussions with them.
Yeah, it's like a lot of things in life. Motivation depends on how much you have. If you're motivated, you can always do it quick.
Yeah, exactly. And you show them the outside world and what it's like and give them permission to actually give themselves some time to have some fun. And it's a totally different world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about how someone could interact with you. What's the best way going to be if somebody's interested in working with you? How would they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I would recommend checking out. I'm on all the social media platforms, but my YouTube channel in particular, it's under the Robert Poole, like a swimming pool with an E in the end, and get a lot of videos on there that'll give you an idea of the kind of my philosophy on a lot of things. So I always recommend that. Check out somebody you're interested in working with, but you can email me directly and at robertoperatortoowner.net, and we could certainly be happy to sit down with you for half an hour or so and do a strategy session, evaluate where you are in that spectrum from operator to owner, and then give you some strategies that you can, like I said, implement over the next 90 days and make a significant progress toward getting yourself out of the business and getting some of your freedom back, like we're talking about.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, let's transition to the Fast 5 questions now. Ready for the first one?
Absolutely. Let's hit it.
All right. So first question, you wake up in the morning, business is gone. You have a laptop computer, place to live, food and clothing, $500 in your pocket. What do you do first?
The first thing I'm doing is going over my mental contact list, my Rolodex, so to speak, and reaching out to those people and letting them know, of course, the situation, what I'm doing, what my plans are, and starting those relationships. Because again, our relationships, it really is what our business is about. And so hopefully you may not have a huge network, but that's something to constantly work on, but you start with whatever you've got. And so I would start with what's available right there, which is my network.
Love it. Love it. What's the biggest business mistake you've ever made?
I think probably the most painful financial mistake, I'll put it that way, was letting my business partner and I, we had sort of key man insurance policies and insurance on each other. So if one passes away, the other one can buy out the share. And we let our policies lag about a year before he passed away. And because we both thought we're gonna renew, but we want to get in better shape. So when we're going for those blood tests or whatever, you get a better rate. Boy, was that stupid. And I found out, because you never think it's going to happen to you. And it happened to me. And let's just say when it came to buying out my partner's interest with the estate and everything, that insurance sure would have helped. I'll put it that way. So,
if you have insurance, do not get rid of it until you get new insurance at that point. But and there's so many people out there, and you're a cautionary tale. You need to have that in place because you don't know. Your partner did not expect to wake in, nor did you expect him to not wake up one day. And it's something that is the simplest thing to do, but it's the hardest thing to get owners to buy into, because I'm not going to die while I'm working. I mean, I'm going to die when I'm old. Yeah, maybe not. but what if in those cases? So absolutely.
Absolutely.
What's a good book that you'd recommend for our audience?
Well, I would say probably my favorite book right now is a book
Mhm.
by a guy named Keith Cunningham. It's
Okay.
called The Road Less Stupid, if you're familiar with it. But he's an entertaining author. At least I find his stuff entertaining. But it's a solid business book. And what I like about it is he's got a lot of chapters that are almost self-contained. So
Mm.
you can read it cover to cover, but also you can bounce around and use it as a reference. And he's got just a lot of really wise material in there, things he's learned over the years, and I've actually implemented a lot of the stuff he talks about in there. So we actually give it to all our new clients because I think it's a really great book. So yeah,
I love that.
The Road
Less
Cunningham.
stupid. I love it. What's a good tool that you use in your business every day that you might recommend?
I was thinking about this, and we all have so many tools, but I was thinking about what do I use all day long? And it sounds lame, but this password manager, KeePass, KeePass. It's a pretty open source thing, but because I've bounced around and used different things over the years, and I started using it a couple of years ago, and it's simple and easy to use. And these days, with all our passwords and everything
Mm.
everywhere, you got to have good quality stuff. So for me, that's actually a very important business tool that I use. Like I said, we all use a bunch of different stuff, but I think if I had to go without something today, that would not be one of the things that I want to go without. So
The one I use, same thing. It is ingrained into my life at this point. Plus,
yes,
it's gone in as I've set up new passwords. It's put in these incredibly complicated passwords that I would never be able to recreate. So they've pretty much locked me in for life at this point.
yes, absolutely. It's like our phones. But if for some reason I don't have it, I don't know what to do. My life
Exactly.
ends.
I can't get it. Yeah, I can't deal with anything. Last question. What is your definition of freedom?
Options.
Okay.
Having options to me, whether that's financial options or life choice options, to me, it's all about having a choice. And that's what freedom is about. So that's the kind of in the terms that I think about.
I love it. Absolutely. Well, Robert, thank you so much for being on today. Remind us one more time of the best way to get a hold of you.
I would say just simply email. So it's Robert at operator2owner.net. Shoot me an email. Let me know that you heard about it on Jeff's podcast here, and more than happy to talk to you.
Brilliant. Well, certainly we'll make sure that's in the show notes, folks. So make sure that you take him up on his offer to sit down with you for 30 minutes and assess your situation and give you some advice. So thanks a lot. We're on twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we're on all the major podcast channels and YouTube. So wherever you're at, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you give us a little upvote wherever you're at. And on top of that, please share a comment with us. We want to know that you're out there because we love to answer those. Thanks a lot, and we will see you guys back here the very next time.
All in